So the question is, what can be done? And here I'll say a few words about something that we have been involved in at the request of the G20. The G20 asked us to do the following. First, to see where the world economy was going. They gave us their forecasts and their intended policies, and we constructed a baseline scenario. And then they said, well, from that baseline scenario, which is roughly what you've seen, how could we do better? What are the measures that we could take globally, individually, and together to achieve a better outcome? And the list is a fairly obvious one, is that the advanced countries should probably fiscally consolidate. But they are going to do so only if they are not too worried about growth, so there's another source of demand. So there has to be rebalancing, which means that emerging market countries have to rebalance, decrease their trade surplus or their current account surplus. And then in the case of Europe in particular, it's true that growth is dismal, but potential growth is also dismal, and it's clearly a constraint. And basically Europe has had very little productivity growth for the last 10 years. And so if it hopes to solve its fiscal problems by growth, which is the easiest way of doing it, it needs to do something. So let me just show you what we suggested. First, some evidence on the need for reforms in Europe. This is a graph of average productivity growth in a number of European countries, with the US at the end. Let me just draw your attention to the red line. The red line is what we call total factor productivity growth, so the part which is not due to the fact that you increase capital intensity. So pure technological progress. And basically, as you can see, the picture is, for a number of European countries, absolutely dismal. Spain has had negative measured total factor productivity growth for more than 10 years now. Portugal has had roughly zero, France roughly zero, Italy roughly zero. Germany has done better, and then the US has done in between. So clearly here, it would be good to improve things. We worked with the OECD on how much structural reforms could improve growth. Remember, it's harder for countries which are at the frontier to actually have fast productivity growth, so they can't do what some of your countries have been doing. But the numbers are not negligible, so this is based on, I think, fairly serious econometric work, and it says if you were to, in each country, get regulation to best practice, this is the kind of increase in annual growth rate that you could hope to get over a period of 5 years. So, for example, for the US, you could basically hope to get 0.2% more per year, for the Euro, 0.3%. These are not enormous numbers, but if you live in Europe, these are big numbers. Here, there are rounding errors, rebalancing. So here again, we've tried to go beyond the slogan, Asia should rebalance, made the point which will be very familiar to all of you, which is what rebalancing means depends on the country. But the focus on China leads to say what needs to increase is consumption. That surely is true of China. Here you basically have consumption ratios for a number of countries, and you can see that China's ratio is very, very small relative to the average for emerging market countries, which is the blue line. But in many countries, that's actually not the main issue. In many countries, it's real investment, which is low. And that dates basically to the post-Asian crisis. Financial intermediation is still not in great shape in various dimensions. And so it's clear that the rebalancing should be more focused on investment rather than consumption. Now let me end with what happens when we put all this together. We have a big machine at the front in which we have many regions, and we can basically look at the effects of various policies. And this is what we find. So what we did was to look at a set of policies which could potentially improve growth in most of the regions of the world. So the first one is fiscal consolidation in the US and in Europe at a rate slightly faster than the one that we discussed earlier. Now, not surprisingly, this does good things eventually, but in the short run, it decreases demand and is bad. So the blue lines basically show you that initially we get a decrease in output and then a recovery. Emerging Asia loses because the growth rate of its export markets drops. Now, we say, okay, so advanced countries do this. What about rebalancing in emerging market economies? So we basically introduce measures which lead emerging economies to decrease their net exports, focus more on internal demand. Now, you can see that this helps a bit the non-emerging market countries. They now have slightly more demand for their goods. So we now get the red line. And for emerging Asia, we basically get back to basically zero. So the net effect of the fiscal contraction in the US and the rebalancing more or less cancel. And then we introduce the last set of measures, which are these structural reforms, which are the green lines. And basically what happens is, in all countries, it helps. It looks like a very big increase relative to the other measures. It's true, it's very big relative to the other measures, but remember, the absolutes are not very large. We're talking about improvements of 0.2%, 0.3% per year. But the bottom line is, we think that movements in these three directions would probably be good for the world. And if the G20 committed to a number of these policies, the recovery would be on stronger grounds. And that's what we've pushed in the last Toronto meeting.